of Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to this great state of ours. These beautiful plantation homes reflect the fascinating history of our culture and cuisine, and I'd like to share this story with you. Why not join me and some of my friends as we visit the plantation homes of our state and cook up another great Taste of Louisiana?
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Louisiana Gold and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Often I'm amazed to learn of the tragedies that many of our Louisiana plantation homes had to endure just to be with us today. Here in St. Francisville, there's one home built by the Ford family in the early 1800s that's a perfect example of this determination. The home was nearly destroyed by the invading Union Army during the Civil War. Even the china and silver had to be wrapped in burlap and thrown into a nearby lake, only to be retrieved many years later. It was in the late 1800s that a tragic fire totally destroyed the home, but luckily most of the original furnishings were saved. Once again, the Ford family rebuilt the house, and today most of the priceless treasures are on display for you and I to see because of the persistence and determination of one family. I'm Chef John Folse. Welcome to Catalpa Plantation. Exceptional portraits, antiques, china, and silver grace every room here at Catalpa. Pieces as rare as this Empire Green Napoleon fruit set are commonplace here. Who wouldn't yearn to own a single piece, let alone a complete set of china, hand-painted by the naturalist John James Audubon? It is believed that Audubon painted this flower pattern on these beautiful serving pieces while working as a tutor for Eliza Perry, great-grandmother of the owner of Catalpa. This gorgeous porcelain champagne bowl, painted with purple and green grape designs, has been in the family since the early 1800s. It shows Bacchus, god of wine, as a child drinking with many of his friends. Over the mantelpiece in the main parlor is a portrait of Eliza Perry. It was the beautiful Eliza of Oakley Plantation who Audubon was hired to teach music, dancing, and other social graces. While there, he painted many of his famous birds of America. This detailed faubourg mantel is supposedly one of a kind in Louisiana. Jenny Lynn's handwritten sheet music rests atop a mahogany piano that was played so often by the owner's mother that the ivory keys were actually worn from the piano. Though burned to the ground in the late 1800s, Catalpa was totally rebuilt on its original foundation. Many pieces, such as these cast-iron dogs, survived not only the tragic fire, but a bullet hole from a Union rifle. They remain at the entranceway today. Twin porches to enjoy a South Louisiana breeze are accented by carved banister rails. Impressive gingerbread, typical of days gone by, lends a hint of the Victorian period to this otherwise simple style. Today, as in the past, the grounds are park-like and framed by an avenue of live oaks. Originally, there was a pavilion for dancing, fishing ponds, and numerous fountains. This 1800 sugar kettle serves as a planter, but at one well-documented party, it was packed with ice and filled to the top with mint juleps. Today, my guest in the kitchen is the present owner of Catalpa, Miss Mamie Thompson. She is a direct descendant of the Ford family, and it was her mother who owned the famous Rosedown Plantation here in St. Francisville until it was sold just a few years ago. Miss Mamie is the sixth-generation Ford to continually live here at Catalpa. Catalpa is important to us not only because it's such a beautiful home in St. Francisville, but because of the fact that it has remained in the same family since the day it was built. And you can imagine what that brings to us here today. All of these original journals from the plantation, all of the furnishings, the artwork, all of the porcelain and china. It's a museum, exactly. It's a museum of some of the rarest pieces that you'll find on any plantation, and you should see this home. Not only is Miss Mamie a great host, but I guarantee you, you will love a visit there any afternoon. Just stop on by. She'll be there. Some of the foods of that area, of course, influenced by the English. That's the rolling Felicianas of Louisiana. And we tend to see a lot of dishes that come to the Felicianas from the English background. And one of the things that I want to show you today is right on this platter. This is a soup that I'm going to make definitely English. I've got some potatoes. This is our green onions, or shallots as we call them in South Louisiana, and sausage. This is a cream potato, green onion, and sausage soup. I'm going to mix all of these ingredients together in the black iron pot to make a wonderful soup served in the Felicianas, not only by the English, but by everyone else living there. In the black iron pot, I'm going to add some of this buttery flavored oil. I want to make sure that I get a good little coating on the bottom here, because this is where the roux is going to come from. I'm going to hold all of this together with the roux. I'm going to add a little flour to it, and let me kick that fire way up. And I'm going to start my soup the same way we start many soups in Louisiana. I'm going to add onions, celery, and bell pepper. And even though I'm putting green onions, the green and the white bottoms of those onions, I'm going to also add the rest of these fresh flavorings: onions, celery, bell pepper. I'm going to put some red ones in because this is going to be a cream-based soup. And, of course, a touch of garlic. I have to add some garlic into my pot, so I'm going to put some of that in. Now, I want to stir all of this around because I want to wilt these vegetables just for a second down into the bottom of the pot. And once they're wilted, then I can start to add my other flavors. I want to definitely add the sausage. Now, I have two different sausages here, and you can take a look at this. One is the andouille sausage, which is a very heavy, this is heavy smoked. It's actually cubed pork that's seasoned with a little garlic and pepper and put into the casing, smoked for about, well, I guess 6 or 7 hours. And this one here is just the very light smoked pork sausage, but I'm using the andouille sausage today, the heavier smoked sausage, to give the soup a much more pronounced flavor. So I'm going to add this chopped sausage right down into the pot, and all of that smoked flavor will start to impart its flavor down into the butter and all of those seasonings. Now, I'd saute this for just a second before adding the potatoes, and remember that the potatoes will not only flavor this soup, but will thicken it as well. So I'm going to pour the potatoes down into it. Now, these aren't parboiled. Of course, you could parboil them, but the only thing is you would add them a little bit later because they would cook apart and, of course, thicken the soup much too early. You want to make sure that there's still a little al dente, so to speak, so that we have some cooking time in the pot with these potatoes. So now that that's in, I can add my green onions. Now, I did mention that these are shallots, as we call them in French Louisiana, shallots or scallions, as some people call them. But this is where the leek soup of England kind of finds its way into the pots of Louisiana. This is very similar to the leek and potato soup that you find in many restaurants today, but again, the Louisiana flavor is being added to it. Very, very nice soup flavor there. So I'm going to stir this around, and then I'm going to thicken it with a touch of flour. We just put about 2 or 3 tablespoons because I want to pick up all of that butter flavor in the bottom, get all that oil up into my roux. And that's all I'm doing is making a little white roux. You can see how it comes together once I stir it in like this. Stir it all around, and I pick up all of that buttery flavored oil in the bottom of that pot, and then I can add my stock. Of course, I can use chicken stock, I can use fish stock, I could use water actually, because there's a lot of good flavor from the sausage and all of those onions and garlic flavors, but I'm going to add a little bit chicken stock here, and I want to add just enough to just kind of thicken it with the roux that's in the pot. You can see how it all comes together quickly. This is a basic velouté, as we call it, a velvety looking stock, very velvety, as you can see here. Look how pretty all that is. And I could come back now and add a little heavy whipping cream to it, because obviously the heavy whipping cream will finish it and make almost a, as we call, a bisque out of this soup. And you'll have to continue to add as much stock as it'll take to get to the consistency of a nice thin soup. if you don't put enough stock, you're going to have a stew with the amount of roux that you have here. Okay, once all of these things are put together, I would bring this to a low boil, and then I would simmer it for, I guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 or 20 minutes, and then I could continue to flavor it with a little touch of salt, not too much, just enough to pick up that flavor. Remember, the chicken stock is going to have salt in it, a little cracked pepper. I'm going to put a couple shots of Louisiana pepper sauce, and then 1 or 2 little sprinkles of nutmeg. Of course, now I could put in whatever of the fresh herbs that I would want to. I could just tear some thyme or a little bit basil down into this pot if I'd like to pick up again more of those nice spice flavors or herb flavors. Allow this to just simmer, and you're going to have a wonderful soup. And we can plate this up in a little while. I'll let you see what it looks like. I'll lower the flame because I definitely don't want this to scorch with that nice velouté look to it. And it'll sit here for just a couple more minutes. Okay, the next dish that I want to do for you is a dish that I've come to love. And for some reason, many people will walk away from this dish, but I tell you, I'm crazy about it. And this is a corned beef hash. And I want you to take a look at this platter. I've got corned beef here, and I think the thing about corned beef is a lot of people are confused as to exactly what it is. This little piece of brisket has been corned in sugar and salt. It's been actually soaked in a brine for about 4 weeks until it's kind of pickled. It's a pickle meat. And then you can roast it or bake it or boil it, whatever you want to do with it. But if there's some leftovers, you can chop it up, and what you'll have is this nice corned beef that you see right here. I have a big bowl of it. I'll show you what it looks like when I chopped up about a pound or two. See what this is. And I'm going to mix this with the other ingredients that you see on the platter. Normally when you do corned beef, you mix it with potatoes. I have a white potato here, and I also have a Beauregard yam from Louisiana and some basil and thyme. I'm going to saute all of these things together to make a really nice breakfast dish that we love in Louisiana. So I've fired up this skillet. I'm going to add a little bit more of that buttery flavored oil to the skillet. And again, even in the hash, I'm going to saute more of those onions, celery, and bell pepper. Now, people really get confused when they see us adding all of these vegetables to very simple dishes like a hash. They would think that, well, if you're going to add potatoes and it's already been corned, why do you need to add all of these flavors? Well, that's just typical of Louisiana cooking. We like to add a lot of these fresh vegetable seasonings to everything we cook. That's the dimension of flavor that we're looking for. Okay, I'm going to also add a touch of garlic. As you know, I have to put that in there. And then the potatoes, I'm going to add the white potatoes, and these have been poached or parboiled just for a second to get them nice and tender. You see how small they are, so they're going to cook quickly. And then I'm going to add the rest of my corned beef after I stir this around for a minute or two. Bring all of that just to a nice heat. You don't want to cook it too much. It's already cooked. And now I can add my herbs. I'm going to put my chopped thyme and basil into the saute pan, and then my corned beef. All chopped, all cooked. All I want to do here is to make all of these flavors marry well in this black iron skillet of the Felicianas here. I just want to stir all of these things around. And now, how would you serve this? Well, there's a lot of ways to serve it. I mean, I've seen it just kind of piled up on a really nice big platter in the center of the table and served basically as an accompaniment to toast or French bread, all of those really nice breakfast items. You can use it a lot of different ways for breakfast, but my favorite way is the traditional way. We would just take it after it's nice and sauteed like this. I would place some poached eggs right on top of it, and that's what I want to show you right now. I could just let this stay in the skillet. I'll mash it down like this and let it just kind of cook all together here in almost like a pancake, as you can see. And that's the way it's served a lot of times, right in the skillet. And I'll just cut this fire off here and show you what this platter of the corned beef looks like. I want you to take a look at this big, beautiful platter with the corned beef with the poached eggs right on top of it, just the way you see it served in many of the traditional restaurants, and I'm sure in many of your own homes. It's a really pretty dish. That's the corned beef with the poached eggs. What other dishes did I find in and around Catalpa and in St. Francisville? Well, take a look at this. Now, this is kind of strange, but one of the best tasting dishes you'll ever eat. This is a barbecued pecan. I have the pecans that have been wrapped in a little butter, Worcestershire, and cane syrup, and then put on a cookie sheet and baked for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then sprinkle a little sugar on top of them or salt, and it becomes a great little hors d'oeuvre. The next thing I want to show you is these avocado pirogues. Take a look at this. This is avocado that's been, artichoke. What am I thinking about? Artichoke. We've cut them in half, poached them, scooped them out, and filled them with crab meat. Look at that nice stuff. We grow a lot of these in the gardens of Louisiana, too. Really a nice dish. Beautiful. Now, I'm going to show you what this soup of mine looks like because it's really nice. Take a look at this, how pretty it is. I can come back and finish seasoning it with a little bit more salt and pepper. I can put some red bell pepper in it to finish it. I can smell all of that nice smoked sausage that's cooking away in there. I can also put this in a food processor or a blender right now and blend it, and it would be so nice and creamy. But let me show you what it plates up. Let me show you how it looks when I dip it up here. It's really a nice dish. Look how pretty and creamy. You talk about velvety. It's absolutely spectacular. Just take a look at this, and I'm going to garnish it with a little touch of this purple cabbage on top of the soup. Really a nice soup dish, again, from St. Francisville. Okay, well, while all of this was cooking, I got my good buddy, Miss Mamie Thompson. Here she is right here in the kitchen. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you.
Nice to see you. So good to have you with us. I've been cooking all of these things over here. Smells pretty good, huh?
It does. It's nice to be here.
Well, great. So nice to have you. You know, when I was at Catalpa last, we talked about the buttermilk pie. Remember, we talked about it and cut a big slice out of it? Well, I have some.
And it was so good.
Hey, and you're going to be able to take this one home with you, too.
That would be wonderful.
What I have here is about a cup of flour and some sugar and a couple of eggs in this big, pretty bowl. And I'm going to mix them all together. This is a really simple recipe from the Felicianas. I think it's actually a really good English dish. You were telling me that y'all made a lot of custards in and around the Felicianas,
That's right.
but you never really had the...
Served custards a lot.
Custards were a big dessert there, but not really the buttermilk pie. But I tell you, we've had a lot of it in and around that area. I'm going to put some buttermilk into it. I'm going to put a little butter right here, a touch of vanilla, and then some cinnamon and nutmeg, and I'll just throw all of this into the bowl, put all those flavors together, and I would put this into a pie shell, an unbaked pie shell, once it's all whipped together. The buttermilk and butter, of course, will give it a really wonderful flavor. I have a pie shell right here, one that's already formed into the pie pan, and look at this. I'll just pour that in, nice and creamy, really a beautiful pie. And when it's baked, I want to show you what it looks like. I want you to see this beautiful buttermilk pie, the same one that you and I ate when we were at Catalpa just a couple of weeks ago. Isn't that a beautiful little pie there?
Just
wonderful flavor.
Well, great. It was so good.
I'll pack that up for you. Miss Mamie, this piece right here is one of the pieces that we talked about. This was wrapped in burlap and thrown into a lake at Catalpa during the Civil War, right?
That's right. Wrapped in burlap and thrown in the lake. That's how it was saved.
How long do you think it stayed in the lake?
Well, it stayed there a year or so. I can't know exactly. I wasn't living back there during the Civil War, so I have to just just make a guess on it. But it was there for no more than a year.
It's a beautiful piece.
His family said it came out, it was jet black. And it took a lot of scrubbing and all to get it back to normal.
Well, it's a beautiful piece today, and this is a special piece, too. I really like this cup. This is a cafe au lait cup. It's one of the big, oversized cups that, of course, we would sit and have the planters' breakfast in the morning. We would fill this up with cafe au lait and a little probably cane syrup and sugar. And this is one of the cups that supposedly Audubon actually painted, right?
Well, it was thought that Audubon did it. Now, it is not signed, but the family thought Audubon. He was teaching my great-grandmother, and did wake like that, some wake like that just for the family. And this was just done for the family with the wild flowers on it. And they think that it was done by all of them.
Well, it's really a beautiful piece, and I see that we have a little glass of sherry here. Every time I come to Catalpa, you give me a little glass of sherry. So today I want to give you a little glass of sherry. Welcome to the kitchen.
Sure.
Tell me something, Miss Mamie. How was it growing up on a plantation like Catalpa?
Well, I'll say it was wonderful. I don't think anybody had a happier life than we did growing up as children at Catalpa. My parents were wonderful. My ancestors were wonderful. They grew old in years, but not in their ways. They were always young. We would have our little tea parties. We amused ourselves with very simple things, but we were all very happy. We would have little tea parties out under the live oak trees, little round tables with pretty linen cloths on them, a little centerpiece in the center of fresh flowers, which we would pick and arrange ourselves. Most of our life was spent outside. Our fun was out playing tennis or badminton. Our place, I loved to ride horseback. I would ride through the fields and through the little lanes, and it was beautiful country then. Of course, our little byways and pathways now are tourist attractions, so we don't have many of them left.
There's highways going through there.
Highways, byways have turned into highways.
How was the visiting back then? Did y'all visit all other plantations?
Yes, the plantations visited quite a bit. The carriage, they'd go by carriage, which took quite a long time. The carriage would come up with the man dressed in his white coat that would take us down to different other plantations. Rosedown we'd go to quite often because that was my mother's home. But it took a full hour to get there.
Gee,
now it takes 5 minutes.
What about the Civil War? I know the Civil War inflicted a lot of destruction in that area. Was Catalpa damaged pretty bad?
Catalpa was damaged a great deal. Fortunately, the home was spared. But the Catalpa originally was a large sugar and cotton plantation. When the troops came through, they destroyed the sugar houses. The greenhouses were destroyed because they were so large they had fruit trees. And when the troops came through, they destroyed things that were producing food for the armies. So the sugar houses and the greenhouses were destroyed.
So that would have been the first things to go.
That's right. Fences were torn down and cattle got in and trampled things.
What about the many pieces? You say that Catalpa is not a museum; it's a home, and I agree it is. But the pieces of furniture and the paintings, and of course the china are just all museum quality. It's a beautiful.
Well, they're just things special because they've been in the family, and they're special to the family, and they're very lovely things.
Tell me about, you and I were talking one day about Sunday dinner at Rosedown. All the families would get together, especially around holidays, and go to Rosedown for dinners. And what was that like?
It was wonderful. The meals were very formal. We would sit down at the table, in spite of an hour that it took to get there, we'd sit down at the table at 2 o'clock and get up at 5. 7 courses being served. But the food was wonderful. I didn't mind sitting there a bit, even as a child, because it was so good, and I could anticipate each course being brought in, 7 courses. There wasn't a lot on each plate, naturally being that many courses, but my grandmother would always require us to leave something on our plate for Mr. Manners. I grew up thinking that Mr. Manners was a poor old gardener that was starving to death for want of food. Now I think of all that good food that I left for that old man who didn't exist.
Miss Mamie, thank you so much for coming to visit with me in the kitchen today and sharing those great stories of Catalpa and Rosedown. We really appreciate it. I'm going to come back to visit with you and bring this pie.
Sometimes you will.
And thank all of y'all for coming to see more about these plantations, and stop by again as we continue to talk up more about these Taste of Louisiana.
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Chef John Folse's Plantation Celebrations, Recipes from Our Louisiana Mansions, is a full-color 335-page book containing food history, recipes, and over 150 photographs from these southern landmarks. For your copy, send a check or money order for $28.50 to Louisiana Public Broadcasting, 7860 Anselmo Lane, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Or use your credit card by calling toll-free 1-800-973-7246.